I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, yeah, my name is Ben, also known as Benarchist on Twitter. And I am an anarcho-capitalist, libertarian, whatever you want to call me. And we, I guess we engaged in a little scuffle on Twitter and resulted in this. I've been working in politics since high school. Been super involved with the Libertarian Party as well as Young Americans for Liberty for quite a while. I used to be the Pennsylvania State Chair for Young Americans for Liberty. These days, I'm just trying to work a full-time job and, you know, uh, focus more on music than politics in my personal life. But on the internet, I definitely am still engaging in politics a lot, and it's a lot of fun.
I think that's a good thing, man, because I think in any kind of engagement uh, creates conversation. And certain people, the more that happens, I think people that have that mentality to turn that into something that's solution based, that opportunity presents itself more. And that's how, the whole part of us having this conversation, because we were both willing to put ourselves out there to model that kind of behavior. And that's like what I want to do. And it seems like it catches on. I mean, in a little bit of my contribution, and that's where it starts. So anyways,
Hmm.
yeah, the Libertarian Party is something that appealed to me because I was really far on the right. I was very conservative, and I went to consider myself moderate and centrist. And I was like, well, that word libertarian means freedom. I like that. And you
Right?
know what? I don't want
Who doesn't?
regulations. Yeah, yeah, it sounds really good. And there's some people that are politicians that market it really well. But then I started looking at there are debates amongst libertarians against other libertarians. I think it was when Gary, what's his name, that guy from New Mexico that was running for
Gary
president,
Johnson.
Gary Johnson. He was in his
Yeah.
primary with the other candidates. I was
Yeah,
like,
I'm not the biggest fan of that guy, not gonna lie.
oh man, I have a buddy that's a libertarian and he loves Gary Johnson. So it would really be interesting
Yeah.
to hear you guys have a conversation. But I don't know if he's interested in doing a podcast, but it's just really
Hey, I'm down.
interesting. Yeah. I mean, but there's like so much conflict within the libertarian part of the
Yeah.
political side. So the guy that was debating Gary Johnson's like, we don't even need license plates or license to
Well,
drive. I was
that's where
like,
I'm at. That's I agree with that
well,
guy.
that's interesting. And then Gary Johnson's like, well, perhaps we should show some kind of confidence of being able, or somebody that's able to drive, a proof of
Yeah.
being able to drive. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't really seen too many people make arguments that can convince me. So just take that. Why would you be for people that do not have license driving? I mean, they have phones now, and woo, no license.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would. I like regulations, so it enforces some kind of responsible behavior.
I guess a good way to kind of start with this would be to sort of explain, how I approach libertarianism or anarcho-capitalism, whatever label you want to use. I think it fundamentally starts on the basis of you own yourself. Nobody else can tell you what to do with your body. And then from that, there's the non-aggression principle, which basically states that aggression is always bad and you should not do it unless it's in self-defense. So aggression in the name of self-defense of you, a loved one, your private property, that is justifiable. But any sort of initiation of force is totally unethical and should be opposed at all costs. And then from there, private property rights are sort of the other, like the third kind of key factor of libertarianism, as I understand it. So, when you take self-ownership, the non-aggression principle, and private property rights, and you apply those principles consistently, what you find is that the government, any government, I'm using government not just to specifically, call out the American government, though I do feel as though they are probably the worst government on the planet, at least one of the worst. Government is fundamentally and inherently in violation of all of those principles all of the time, even if it's doing good things, like driver's licenses or social security. These things that most people kind of consider good, but if you kind of look into it more, you'll see that there's all these kind of unforeseen consequences of these mechanisms. And the way I would kind of explain it with driver's licenses in particular is like, you know, getting rid of the government does not mean you're getting rid of mechanisms that keep people safe. I think it's kind of ridiculous, this idea that you need a centralized monopoly on violence, which is what government is at the end of the day. That's how we would define government. Um, I don't think you need a centralized monopoly on violence to have all of these good things. In fact, I think that that entity existing sort of, makes everyone less safe. Driver's licenses, what are they really doing to keep people safe? I mean, how many accidents happen every day? How many people still go drunk driving? How many people are texting and driving that have licenses? Almost all of them.
Yeah.
But we're still seeing thousands of driving accidents that get people killed like every week.
Well, have you ever drove in a nation where they don't really enforce traffic laws?
No, I can't say I have. Unfortunately, it sounds fun.
Actually, it is. It is very fun. I went to Mexico and I rented a car in Mexico City. So I was like, whoa, man, this is crazy. And just driving in that area, I mean, like you said, it was very fun. I mean, you could just cut people off. Semi trucks will be closing on you. If you could go fast enough to go right beside, between it, yeah, it was exhilarating. But I mean, just to live that on a daily basis and just be worried about like, the cost of repairing your vehicle because they don't really maintain the roads as well as they should here.
Right.
And I've had a Mexican national said that was something that was very admirable about the United States was the people abiding by the regulations by traffic alone. And even Germany, I mean, they have like some great traffic expectations where they don't even allow radios to go on the Autobahn. I don't recall if it's still like that, but I just remember hearing that freedom to go fast, but it also comes at an exchange as well.
Right.
So, I mean, I just, whatever you value, but it's a defined, regulated structure by the government. And I just see if you don't enforce it, you can end like Mexico traffic, or you could probably end like some Middle Eastern country because my wife's from Iran. And she goes, yeah, it's
cool.
crazy. And I'm just like, so, I mean, I got to see that and experience it. And I'm kind of glad that we do have some kind of structure. And that's due to our government, because I feel people will, like I would trust if everyone was well-spoken and thought like you. I think libertarianism would probably be a realistic agenda for us. But I don't think too many people are even as disciplined to play guitar much or be a musician and then just to not text. They need that consequence because their freedom is literally violence because they're not being responsible on you. Because I was in an accident recently, wasn't my fault, and my car was violated, and I got whiplash. So I mean, I don't know. I don't use that to incriminate the ideology that libertarians have. Those are just sincere questions that I have. So how would you create structure to ensure the safety and the confidence of a country just based on traffic if you just allow?
Well, the short answer is, that's not up to me to decide because it's impossible to predict what, a market would do in the absence of government. Like a free market where people are voluntarily associating with one another is impossible to predict what kind of solutions that will come up with. But we've seen in so many other areas of society where the marketplace has been able to come up with a far more efficient structure for keeping people safe or providing very efficient goods and services at cheap costs. And the market seems, in my opinion, is far more efficient at doing all that stuff than the government ever has been. Or
I agree.
And I want to be clear, like I'm not advocating for no structure. Like when I say I'm an anarchist, I'm not saying no rules. I'm saying rules that are consensually agreed to.
Sure. But that's what I'm saying. I think most people agree on a driver's license and meeting the minimum standards of being able to drive a vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I feel. I mean, that's traditionally what people felt like in the United States from my experience being an American citizen. It's like, I'm 16. I can get my driver's license. I'm going to go to driver's ed. So, I mean, that's been the norm and everyone's been pretty fine with that. And if you failed it, you were mocked and you're just like, hey, you dummy, you didn't pass.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, I don't want to like stay on the driver's license topic too long because like if I'm being like totally honest about my personal philosophical worldview, like, I would like to see a world in which driver's licenses are abolished. However, there are so many significantly more important issues that I think my ideology addresses that are so much more worth talking about.
No, and I agree.
Like if I could take if we could end all the wars, end the Federal Reserve, rein in the COVID regime. I care far more about those things than I do about driver's
Well,
licenses.
do you think the
I
COVID
can take.
regime is pushed because of the markets? It's pushed by the interests of big pharma, which is a privately owned, company. So,
That's a fair point.
and then they also take a lot of precautions to push out their drugs. Because when I hear a lot of people that are against the vaccines, they don't understand the testing and all the stuff. And but they also say, well, it was rushed. And I've
Mhm.
heard so many talking points, and both sides have trash talking points. So I'm in the middle. I'm willing to entertain like different drugs that are just as good as the vaccines. And I'm aware that,
Mhm.
Fauci led people on, but that was private, companies that were
Yeah.
pretty much running the show there.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. What I would say to that is that when a libertarian, at least my kind of libertarian, is talking about private ownership, we have to
Mhm.
go back to my original kind of definition or like founding principles of libertarianism. So a private ownership is only like acknowledged as such in like the libertarian world if that private property or business or whatever it was came into ownership ethically, through the non-aggression principle, and while respecting self-ownership of other people. When we're
Mhm.
talking about big pharma, big tobacco, the military industrial complex, or the entertainment industrial complex, as I like to call it, they're technically privately owned, but at the end of the day, they're just branches of the government, because these industries, especially big pharma, they're so in bed with the government. They're so corrupted by the government that to call them like a privately owned industry, at least in the libertarian sense, doesn't really work. I view Pfizer as just another arm of the government. Um, I view Raytheon and Boeing as just other arms of the government. You know what I mean? So
I view that as
uh,
corporate interests that use the government to prioritize what they want. It's like
mhm,
us, the citizens, we don't do that. We're not involved in local politics. They are. We're not involved in
yeah,
state politics. They are. We
right.
get all riled up for national politics, but that's it. And you really can't make a lot of changes, on a national, from the top down. You have to make sure you start from the bottom up. And that's how you get more momentum to change things. But people aren't just not involved. And it's a lot easier to just say, oh, the government is allowing this private corporations, or is it the private corporations that prioritize their interests via our government? Because we're just standing there letting them do it. and
I
and
think you're right. Actually, I totally agree with that. I
in,
think it's corporations, lobbying the government to be able to do very evil shit.
hmm,
And the way I would explain it, the way I've explained it to a lot of my left leaning friends, and I've been able to kind of convince them to come onto my side through this, like, um, the government is the tool that the top 1%, the corporations, whatever you want to call them, uses to do all the evil shit. It's like the analogy I like to use is like, if a miner has a pickaxe, or like if a painter has a paintbrush, like they need those tools to do the things that they do. Once you take the paintbrush away from a painter, they're not going to be able to paint.
hmm.
I think if you take the government out of that equation, what you're essentially doing is thrusting these corporations into the free market, where they will be subjected to the principles of the free market, voluntary association, and all that good stuff. And at the end of the day,
Competition.
competition, exactly. So right now, you don't see real competition, at least on the lower level, on the small business level, for Walmart or
Well,
Amazon or
why?
Pfizer.
Because they sell themselves out. Walmart will offer a price and they'll get bought out. A
Mhm.
lot of because I've seen that because I live in a small town, but now it's a big city. I saw it over time get consumed by bigger corporations, Targets,
Right,
Walmarts, franchises that bought out the mom and pop shops.
right.
Maybe the mom and pop shops didn't have an issue. We're just like, oh, you're offering me this much? Okay. you know?
Yeah.
So over
Well,
time, the free market allowed bigger businesses that just had the resources to buy out their competition, and
mhm.
their competition was willingly selling them their
That's fair.
part of the
At
pie.
the end of the day, when if I, if a bigger company comes to my comes to me in my business and says, hey, we want to give you this amount of money for your business, that, and I can choose to agree or disagree, at the end of the day, that is a voluntary transaction. I have no problem with that, but we cannot dismiss the ways in which these corporations lobby the government to pass all these laws and rules and regulations that small businesses will never, ever be able to afford to keep up with. That's how Walmart maintains its monopoly. That's how Amazon maintains its monopoly. That's how these giant corporations keep their power, is that they have all this money and power to influence the government to make it impossible for them to have any kind of competition whatsoever. So it's a lot more than just smaller businesses, being bought out. It's at the end of the day, it is the government that is forcing a competition to not be able to occur.
I agree to a certain extent, but I mean, there's a lot of nuance to, especially with retail. So, but one of the questions that I had for you, because there's a nuance to like buying our goods and services too. Everything's online now. To have that infrastructure, a lot of small mom and pops don't have their fleets of Amazon trucks to do that. And I'm a little bit conservative too when it comes to like natural resources, because I worked in retail. All the resources that you utilize to put in your store for, displays, people to try on, it's very wasteful. And a lot of that doesn't get sold. You just see it all over the ground. I mean, if you go to some lower end retail store, you see crap all over the place. And that's just waste. And I think there's a lot more of a effective way to market stuff online that's more efficient. A lot of people push on Jeff Bezos a lot, but he's done a really good job of just getting your goods to you. And there's not a lot of waste. I don't like the guy. He's a billionaire. I'm kind of anti-billionaire, but he came from a modest lifestyle, which he doesn't brag like Elon Musk. He doesn't feel the need for attention like Elon Musk, because he's living large. He's already swollen in control and just, being a boss. He's taking over so many things without even bragging about it. So, that's kind of admirable, but I don't like that either, because you have to be cautious with that. But it's just like, it's really convenient right now. And I do my best to support mom and pop shops. I mean, when we go out to eat, we always hit up the local places. And we go to Winco because they give some stock to their employees. I don't like going to Walmart. I try to stay away from all those bigger retail stores and grocers. But that's really interesting right now, purchasing your stuff online, because you were mentioning how Amazon is a little bit crazy, but they're just pioneers in how they deliver goods right now. I don't really see how a smaller business can compete with that.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that like it is possible within, and by the way, I do not think we have a free market right now at all. But I do think that within the marketplace, sometimes I guess you could call it maybe a natural monopoly, but sometimes there's just no need for competition. Sometimes you have a business that's providing a service, that everyone's pretty much happy with, and there's not really enough demand for a competition. And, in Amazon's case, I mean, you got Wayfair. What else is there? I can't really think of any other, business that is like competing with Amazon at the moment, but I mean, Walmart, I guess they sell stuff.
I guess
online.
the local mailing service, like if you go buy from the actual business themselves, they'll mail out through, I guess, UPS and all that.
Yeah, I do that a lot with like, musicians I support, when buying their merchandise, I'm not getting that shit through Amazon, right? But they all got local warehouses they ship out of.
Yeah, but, you get a discount sometimes if you buy actual from the dealership themselves. You'll give you because I buy all this El Gato stuff, and I don't really see any sales on Amazon for El Gato merchandise unless I buy from El Gato directly. But I mean, it's just really interesting because I mean, as a consumer, I'm like looking at different ways of how to buy goods. I do like the mixed economy, and that's what we are doing, because I think that would address a lot of those areas where, like you were saying, there's not that competition. The government, smart government regulations could, police that and would prevent monopolies and prevent all these patents of being bought by corporations, to prevent competition. And also, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know how you could probably police that. I mean, I'm not a politician, and there's probably actual ways to prevent companies from becoming monopolies. I mean, you're not allowing two Walmarts to be together in a radius of certain, I don't know, a distance, or I
Mhm.
don't know, but that would just kill local businesses that didn't want to sell. You
Well,
know, they're all their customers. Well,
you want to know how to prevent monopolies? You stop subsidizing big corporations.
oh yes,
You deregulate the fuck out of the market so that small businesses can actually compete. I mean, just a real world example is like these minimum wage laws that get passed. Walmart lobbies for those because they know that only they can afford to pay their employees that certain amount,
yeah.
and that smaller businesses could never do that.
Well, I
Um,
remember they were having some, like, I don't really recall what the legislation that was getting passed, but it was only going to be implemented for companies that had over 100 employees. I think if you do something like that, that would not necessarily be a punishment for bigger corporations. They could just burden the cost of giving their employees, more wages, and then still being a little bit more lenient to smaller businesses that are trying to build themselves up. So I think that would be a little bit more realistic, because a big argument from conservatives, like, well, you don't want to give minimum wage to like some waiter. They're just learning how to become a productive member of society by getting a job, becoming responsible. That has some merit to it. My first job was at Wendy's. I mean, you shouldn't pay me
I
the
also worked at
top.
Wendy's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't say I'm like deserving of the top rate of the pay scale. I mean, it was valuable getting that experience, and just being able to build the confidence of communicating with clients that were ordering fast food. It built that
Right.
confidence. That was the actual benefit of getting a job as the young kid. So I think if you were to allow like some kind of rubric for higher wages for corporations that could carry the burden, because they have all these tax loopholes and all that. So why don't they carry the load a little bit in certain areas where they get relieved in others, and then they use our
Mhm.
infrastructure a lot more than a mom and pop place with all their semi trucks just busting up our roads. So they take a lot without putting back into well, and they
Hey,
make it
man,
look like.
like,
Hmm?
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's
Sorry.
okay. No, go for it.
I am at the end of the day, I oppose like all regulation, but if my only options are everybody is subjected to the same regulations, or only the giant corporations and the rich assholes are subjected to the very strict rules, I'm going to take that and like what you're advocating for. Like, as long as like we can like reduce these restrictions on small businesses, that's really what I care about at the end of the day. However,
Hmm.
I think that my kind of view of government is that it's inherently an entity that's going to continuously, seek more wealth and power. And history has kind of proven this. I think that, a lot of people, whether they're on the left or the right and the
Hmm.
center, a lot of people that just are not anarchists, they have this sort of mindset where as long as we just elect the right people and pass the right legislation, we can make the government do what it should do, and we can have a good government. It's like, well, people have been trying that for hundreds of years and it has never worked. You cannot find me a government in history that has been kept restrained. Every government at the end of the day either gets taken over by a bigger government or it becomes big and it overextends itself and it starts messing with people and causing all sorts of atrocities, which is what our government is currently doing. Um, I
Right.
just don't think that you can actually have a government that does all these wonderful things that you want it to do. I think that's a more fantastical and utopian than any sort of anarchist theory ever.
Well, I mean, I think every government has its pros and cons. And is there one country you could reference that would be an example of what you advocate for?
There's many anarchist societies that have existed for sometimes up to like hundreds of years before being taken over by a bigger government. I know I can't remember the specific examples off the top of my head. I'll
No,
have to
and,
DM you
and I'm
those.
pretty sure, yeah, that's fine. And that's the thing, I mean, a government doesn't just provide
Oh,
opportunities for its
I
citizens,
thought of one.
but protection to prevent other interests from, meddling with them as well. But go ahead. Well, who's your example?
So you got the Zapatistas in Mexico, I believe. Basically, they're more of a like a you know libertarian socialist or arguably even
They want to
communist
be left alone.
society.
They don't want
They want to be
anyone
left
messing.
alone. I
Mhm.
don't really agree with their internal economics because they're commies essentially. But at the end of the day, they're a stateless society, home of hundreds of thousands of people. They've existed for decades,
Mhm.
and no one really messes with them. And they kind of keep to themselves. They seem pretty well off. They got their ways of doing things, and I think
I
they
mean,
should
they
be left
were,
alone.
made popular by Emiliano Zapata, who I'm named after.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, but yeah, he got killed. So
Rest
unfortunately,
in peace.
yeah, exactly. I mean, he uses that. I rather live on my feet than die. I mean, I rather die on my feet than live on my knees. So that was like a big quote from him. So I think that's awesome. And I don't really know. I haven't studied much of the Zapatistas other than just knowing his history. So it would be kind of cool to see how they are currently and
Mhm.
just utilizing that idea, but on a model that's for a whole country. And I don't know if there's an example other than just for small communities that have lived a libertarian lifestyle, which I'm not trying to say
Yeah.
that's bad or good, but I mean, to run a country, I think you're just going to need that governing aspect. And we could reference the United States when it was like prosperous and what made it that Trump was able to utilize the past to push his agenda. And that's the thing
Mhm.
that I want to go ahead and talk about now. That will
Yeah,
go ahead and
absolutely.
transition us to the pros and cons of both sides, the right and the left. And I guess we could just go ahead and use Trump and Biden, I guess, for those representations. So I'm going to go ahead and say one of the things that Trump did as good is he referenced our past. So I always ask somebody that is a hardcore Trump supporter, what was the part of the past that Trump is referencing that made our country so great? And I never get a response from them because I'm like, okay, what was it? Was it the corporate tax rate? Because when we were very in our prosperous time, we were taxing the heck out of corporations back then.
That's true.
And I go, was it the government funding our infrastructure? Because Eisenhower, I would assume it was during who was a Republican, by the way. 90% of the federal government funded our federal highway system, interstate highway, because I want infrastructure to be updated in our country. And I like the idea of people that have utilized our labor to make massive profits to put back into the pot. That was like the trickle down. And I think that was something that added to that prosperity in our country. I mean, it wasn't probably as common as most people would like to think, but it was something that people could probably say, yeah, so and so he got some sort of good job. His wife stays at home, takes care of the kids. One source of income, you know? So I'm like, is that what you're referencing when you reference MAGA? Did Trump raise those corporate tax rates? Did he invest in the infrastructure like a Republican did? I always hear crickets from them. So I think
Yeah,
that's a
me
good
too.
thing that Trump is forcing those ideologues to really think about, and he's pretty much just doing what Democrats did. But Biden, you know, um, I like the idea that he's putting some emphasis on some legislation. I didn't like Biden. I didn't vote for him in the primary, but I do feel that he was the better candidate because, for one, he didn't create a lot of division on the vaccine. He said he could push it onto the states to make the decision. Trump's the one that put the mandate out there for everybody to stay in their
That is true.
houses. So I'm like, how can you tell? I mean, Biden gave the states the ability to do that, and he put federal mandates for federal agencies. I mean, the military's always been getting injections, so you're going to get the vaccine if you're in the military, and I'm assuming it might be the same for any other federal job. So he kept the same old, in my opinion, especially to address the pandemic. And one interesting thing about me, since my wife is Iranian, she was able to see the storm coming before anybody saw it because she has family there. And people were dropping in her country like no other. So she's like, put a mask on. And this is like before anyone knew about the pandemic. I was like, what are you talking
Mm,
about? I'm not going to put a mask on and look like an idiot. She goes, no, seriously, put a mask on. So I'm like, okay, I won't go put a mask on. I'll stay in my car because I was going to go because I have some kids and we got going Pokemon hunting. And I had a buddy that wanted to go too. So we went, he goes, she convinced me to stay in my car while we went Pokemon hunting. And I was like,
Nice.
I know, I was like, happy wife, happy life. I'm like, okay, I'll do it, whatever.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't comprehend her concern until I finally started seeing it like probably within a month's time hit the United States. I was like, dang. And I saw like the news where India were burning their corpse. And I'm like, holy crap. So I wasn't really getting my news from the media here from the United States. I was seeing what they were doing in
Good.
other countries. In Colombia, we're opening fire on citizens that were rebelling against the lockdowns. I'm like, holy crap, man, what
Mhm.
is going on in the
And
rest
look
of the
at what
world?
Canada did to the trucker convoy. They just took away their bank accounts. They
But
just took their money away.
the trucker convoy wasn't even organized by truckers, and I mean, they were blocking access to port of entries. I mean, if they really value, why weren't they talking about like really things that? Nah, I'm not. I wasn't really a big backer of the trucker. I actually had a conversation with a right winger about that. I go, did they
Hmm.
talk about like better conditions for truckers, less hours? Like there was not anybody that was a trucker that was pushing that movement. So, but yeah, I'm pretty sure Canada had some cringe, policies. And I'm from Texas, so we're just like, yeah, we'll do our own thing. Which I'm a little bit ignorant on what other states did. Like, I have a person that I converse with about COVID a lot, and he's more right leaning, but he's in a blue region in Detroit, and I guess they're more strict. So he's a little bit more like, what did you say about the COVID restrictions? You should check the dosage. You should check all the studies. And all I'm like, ah. In Texas, there's like, whatever. And
You
it's
know, a right winger from Detroit, that's super rare.
yeah, no. We engage quite a bit on. I mean, I wouldn't say he's right winger. He considers himself a libertarian. He's very religious, and he uses profanity. So he's not like one of those like
Yeah.
pearl clutching dudes. But he's really interesting to talk to, and he knows a lot about like he's not an anti-vaxxer. He goes by Who Dat, so that would be an interesting dude to have a conversation with. But aside from that, yeah, it's just really interesting to hear his perspective. And I'm like, well, yeah, you have a different way of thinking about it because you're in a blue region, but I'm a left-leaning dude, but I'm in a red region. And I saw a little bit of what he probably is referring to when we went to New Orleans. They'd even let us in a restaurant because we didn't have our vaccine passports. I was like, wow, that must be pretty, restricting to so many people here in the country.
Mhm.
Do you guys have vaccine passports still?
No, not in Pennsylvania. We never really had passports, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah.
There's some, a couple places, around town that still require that kind of crap. Like, there's this, I have to go off right now. There's this like punk hardcore rock venue, in Pittsburgh.
Okay, I'm
They're
sorry.
called the Mr. No, you're good. They're called the Mr. Roboto Project.
Mhm.
And it's like become like very recently, it's become like my goal to get as many people to just mock this venue as possible. Because, like, listen, you got this venue hosting hardcore punk shows, which almost always include copious amounts of blood, sweat, and spit, right? Because people are moshing and jumping on each other and pushing each other and screaming the lyrics, and that stuff happens. But yet, this is the only venue in town that is not only requiring masks, but also full vaccination. And I'm like, you're just like
Of
ruining
all
the
places.
entire experience. Like, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. And it's like, you just know that they're trying to not get canceled by their like commie friends. It
mean,
makes my blood boil.
yeah, I mean that kind of demographic always dabble with questionable behavior. So it
Yep.
just goes against their whole ideology there. But yeah, but that was like me trying to like be very charitable because that is a big inconvenience. I mean, I'm vaccinated, but I didn't have a passport, and I felt like un-American being interrogated about like that. But at the same time, if I'm able to like mentally prepare myself, like if I'm going to a doctor, put a mask on, okay, that makes sense to me. But just going to a restaurant, I'm willing to take my chances. But at the same time, this is not something that's just yes or no. If you own a business and you have a whole bunch of employees that are not going to get vaccinated, for one, not most Americans are known to be healthy, and they're going to be taking a lot of time off if they get COVID. I've seen this.
Me
I'm
too.
like, whoa. I'm like, dude, you're milking that, man. So I'm not feeling good. Are you vaccinated? No. I'm like, I mean, because one of the things that I've heard from the vaccination, you don't really stay sick for that long. And I was vaccinated and it really didn't affect me that much. I had the sniffles, I was ready to go. So I'm
Mhm.
not saying that is the same for everybody. I know that. But I think the data has shown that, the symptoms are not going to be as severe if you're vaccinated. It's not
Yeah,
going to
I
cure
think you're right
COVID.
about that.
And a lot of people say, we don't cure. There's no such thing as a cure for the dang flu. It's a virus. It minimizes the symptoms. That's all it does. And if
Mhm.
you're a person that's hiring people and COVID's even more contagious than the flu, what if you have so many people out? You're shorthanded. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose profit. Your financial bottom line is just going because people want their freedom and they don't care about your rights as a business. Because here in the United States, businesses have constitutional rights too for their financial interests and for the well-being of their employees. So a lot of people want to push their rights without realizing they're infringing on the rights of others.
Yeah, I think if you're a private business, you should be able to require, whatever kind of, vaccine mandates or mask mandates you want if you're a private business. I guess if we're going to talk about the vaccine, I got one dose of the Pfizer, and then after that, I got a little more skeptical of it, and it didn't affect me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't get sick after or anything like that. But I'm a relatively young and healthy dude. I just don't really think I needed that second dose.
No, no. And
I
they didn't
think
really
that
push it that much here. I don't think they
yeah,
did. Do
yeah.
you feel like they pushed it?
I think they definitely pushed it. I think they're
The
continuing
second?
to push it. Yeah, they're continuing to push boosters and stuff, and they have this updated COVID vaccine, and they're trying to get us to like vaccinate babies and little children. And there's not one scientific study that you can find me that proves that there's a benefit to like infant children to being vaccinated. I
No,
think
I'm
you
a
know,
little skeptical about that as well.
yeah,
But I
it's
don't
it's
I don't think
disturbing.
it's in their bottom line to like kill little kids. That will lose them money. It's just like,
Well, if you want to get conspiratorial, I mean, we might go off the rails a little bit, but I'm skeptical. I'm not fully ascribed to this kind of stuff, but like I'm certainly, these a lot of people, very rich people, like Bill Gates, for example,
mhm,
have been pretty public about this, about a depopulation kind of agenda kind of thing.
mhm.
And I think it's certainly possible or plausible that
Well, let's
this
say I
vaccine
grant
might
you
be part
that.
of that.
Let's say I grant you that. Why would they want to depopulate the population that's doing what they want them to do? They would probably
That's,
want to get rid
I
of the
can't answer
people.
that.
It's
I
like
can't answer
it's
that question.
counterproductive. We have all the people that are alive that go against what we say. They're the ones that live. So
Yeah,
that
exactly.
that conspiracy kind of cancels itself out. It's like, you want me to do what you want, Mr. Bill Gates? Yes.
But
Okay.
like it is true that
You
like
must die.
also like
Ah.
on the flip side, why are they like openly talking about using vaccines to depopulate? Like that you should go watch that Bill Gates TED talk where he like literally like almost word for word says that. It's kind of creepy. I don't know.
To
I'm trying to
give
wrap my head around it too.
because I think it's one of the tactics made by the elite to divide people. That's something that really gets people divisive behaviors, like, pure blood. I'm like, whoop de doo. It's like, okay, good for you. I mean, I
Yeah.
never took the flu vaccine, to be honest. I don't do that because, like you, I felt like I'm pretty healthy. But like after I heard my wife talking about it and seeing news in other parts of the world, but I also recognize that people have like immune compromise. They can't take the vaccine. We shouldn't be a-holes to those people. You
Mhm.
should offer them options too. So I think most
Or like
people.
in New York City when they have these vaccine passports, I mean it's crazy because like the amount of people of color in that city that were not vaccinated, and then you have like all these restrictions on who can go to like restaurants or grocery stores or this and that. It's like that's kind of like bringing segregation back in a way. It's kind of messed up, so I'm really glad to see that New York got rid of those passports.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it hit me in the face when we went to New Orleans. And I was like, whoa, man, this is
Oh
probably
yeah.
how people feel on a
Hmm.
daily basis. I can see why people are getting mad about getting the vaccine. It does feel intrusive. And, that's the perk of living in Texas. I mean, I always wore a mask for a year straight. And everyone, this is what I believe: there's truth and data, information, and all that. And there's also personal truth as well.
Right.
You're not going to be able to convince somebody that had a bad experience with the vaccine, had a loved one that passed away, perhaps due to the vaccine. And that's their personal truth. And you're not going to convince them, like, hey, it doesn't happen to so many people. You're just unlucky. They're
Right.
not going to get them to be like, oh, I buy into the vaccine. Let's get everyone vaccinated. Of course, they're going to be like, don't take it. Maybe, God forbid, if two people kick the bucket due to the vaccine reaction. So I get that. But at the same time, they also have to understand the truths of it helping a lot of people too and saving lives. And I think the media does a very good job of dividing those two demographics. And
Right.
both of them have legitimate concerns,
I
And
guess this is a good, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
It might be a good segue to your original, like what you want to talk about, like, the
Yeah.
left and the right kind of thing, and use some
Which
Trump and
I
Biden.
did talk about Trump, about how he referenced the past. And then I think we got off carried with the vaccine because Trump was the person that put the mandates on and Biden was just putting in federal. So yeah, you're right. So as far as Biden, and I don't know if you probably would agree with this, but he's also pushing like that, the infrastructure legislation, which was a lot of spending, which I don't think it's a bad thing if we spend on things that are going to better our country. You get a return on your investment, and updating the environmental factors of buildings and all that. I do know that there's pork, and I think that's a lot of my conservative friends on Facebook. They're like, yeah, there's a lot of pork in that legislation. I'm like, yeah, I know. And if I was a Republican, I would go ahead and say yes, yay to this bill. But I would run against the Democrats like, yeah, I agree to that because some stuff needs to get taken care of in this country. But they put this on the bill, they put this in the bill, and they put this on the bill. And I'm fiscally conservative. If you elect me, we're going to get rid of that pork.
And they don't even give Congress enough time to read these
Oh, yeah.
4,000 page long bills. And I'm against, government spending. And I think, like in general, and I think 2020 is like the perfect example. It's like 2020 was the best year ever in history for big business. And it's because, they look at the amount of subsidies that these corporations got from the government that year under the Trump administration. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. You can't trust the government to spend our money that they stole from us because taxation is theft. You cannot trust them to spend that money wisely ever. They're going to give it to their cronies. They're going to give it to foreign governments that are just as, if not more corrupt than our own. And maybe they'll spend a little bit here and there on good stuff that helps people. But, all you've seen for the past, since like the 60s or 70s is the cost of living increasing and infrastructure continuing to crumble and everything just basically getting worse. And it's like we're spending more and more and more. Right. Exactly. And,
I sympathize with people, and I rather we emphasize like opportunities for people that are marketing themselves to make it better, especially going to school. I mean, dude, I recognize my economic privilege. When I was going to school, you know how much it cost me to go to get an apartment that wasn't in the ghetto, that wasn't in the hard side of the city?
I don't even want to know.
$650 for a 2-bedroom right by the university.
Dude, I just put a down payment on a one like bedroom like studio for like $675 a month, and that's like before utilities. Like, so I'm moving out soon, but that's insane. I'm jealous.
Yeah, I could walk to campus. Yeah, no. And then gas was significantly cheaper. I mean, the cost of living was better. And I feel like there's a generational divide too. Like people from the past are trying to tell us, oh, I worked hard and I did. I was like, dude, how much did it cost to, just pay the bills and have a family? The goofiest question I get from family members, like, are you going to have more kids? I'm like, you know how much it costs just to put a kid in daycare? Holy $900 a month for an infant and $800 for after 3 or something, or a toddler's age. I'm like, and I had 2 kids. So that was like more than a mortgage. So I'm just like, dude, the cost of living just to have kids, you can see the middle class is shrinking. They're not getting married. What rubric do you need to realize that the economy is not catering to the future of our country?
Right.
And right now I can see more homeless people in the city because, like I told you, I've been able to see the changes. So I think Biden, getting back to that, he offers opportunities through legislation. And if I was a Republican, I would allow that to pass and then take out the pork if I was elected again, and just point out the flaws in that legislation with all those irresponsible spending that you would probably say, hey, that's wasteful. And I'm sure there's a lot of examples because they got all that stuff.
There's no such thing as responsible government spending.
No, there's not. So it'd be easy to make an argument if you're a Republican to say, hey, yeah, let's get this, help people. We got to help our American population, prioritize that. Then we'll argue once they get their assistant, and I'll incriminate you because I got to stack this big of proof against you. But they don't do that.
Rand Paul tried that though. He did try that. He brought that whole. He had that whole like cart with all the
Yeah, but he
like
also
flyers
was
taped
cool
to it.
with the military spending when Trump was giving the increase in military spending too. He
Did you
buckled
say
his.
he? I'm sorry, you cut out there for just a split
Oh no,
second. Did you say he was?
he was criticizing the military budget that Trump was pushing, but he ended up
Right.
supporting it at the end. So he's not
Oh,
going to
did
go.
he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did support that because
Wow.
I'm pretty sure. Go ahead and fact check me on that. I'm pretty sure he did speak out against it, but he
I'll
ended up.
take your word for it because Rand Paul can be very disappointing. He's nowhere near as good as his father. Ron Paul is like a personal hero of mine. I have a cardboard cutout of him somewhere around here. Um, and I think Rand is great on some things, and I think he's just such a disappointment on some other things. I think military spending is definitely one of those things. He could have easily voted against Lloyd Austin to be Secretary of Defense, I think is what his role is, but he didn't. He voted president. So it's like, oh man, come on, be like your dad. Your dad would have voted no on that. You know that. Um,
Well, that's good.
yeah.
Military. That brings us to Ukraine. That's another topic
Yes.
we could discuss. So
Yes.
I'll go ahead and start us off because since you were gracious enough to go ahead and tell me what you thought first with the other two things we discussed. Ukraine. I mean, I don't claim to be a foreign policy expert, but one of the YouTube videos that caught my attention, I don't know, it was just random on my feed. It was with India and what they do to counter China's ambition and military, not necessarily aggression, but their willingness to be more military, embrace their military strength to flex. And the China was doing like this strategy that was called the pearl string to make choke points around certain areas where trade and where they could just, stop India from getting resources if they wanted to. So India really had to think about creating alliances and to counter that. So they came up with the diamond necklace so they could have choke points to counter China. So I was thinking, okay, those are really big powerhouses, superpowers, India and China. They're pretty big.
Right.
So I'm like, does the United States do that? And I was thinking, well, maybe Ukraine is a choke point. What's Ukraine known for? They're the breadbasket of Europe. So that would be very valuable to Russia, who's aligned a lot with China. Russia and China have good relationships.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, and they have a lot of lithium. Now we have a lot of technologies that's trying to push for EV vehicles, and just lithium is a big resource that a lot of countries want or want to control or have prioritized in their interests with their allies. And I heard natural gas was another resource. So
Right.
if we didn't do something proactive, somebody else will. So regardless of what you want to do with Ukraine, it's not going to prevent, stupid behaviors from people in power wanting to control or have a say on how that goes. And I would
Yeah.
rather it be the US than China and Russia. I don't like to give like authoritarians the upper hand on the global, the global influence in the world. So, what if China got that and put sanctions on us, in Russia? They were able to implement that. That would hurt us and poor people in the United States. And if that
Yeah.
led to
I'm against
conflict,
sanctions and tariffs and all that stuff. So yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I think we would be on the crappy end of that stick if we didn't do anything. And we're not necessarily sending troops and going into war, but we are funding it. And I know there's other conflicts in the world that are probably bad. I recognize the sins of our country, but in this specific instance with Ukraine, I've asked these questions to some people, and they really haven't really given me, a good take to make me think otherwise. So what
Yeah.
do you think?
Well, we do have CIA operatives on the ground in Ukraine, and we also have NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine, which is super concerning to me. See, this whole conflict in Ukraine has been kind of, manifesting for a very long time now, and it's the United States has played a pretty significant role in provoking Russia into this invasion. And by the way, I want to say, like, it's Russia did this invasion. I'm anti-war. I'm very anti-Russia and anti-Putin, and I think Putin is a war criminal, and I think he should be locked in a cage for the rest of his existence. However, the idea that this was the United States did not provoke Russia into doing this is so laughable to me. It's insane. Like I think what you saw like all like so in the 1990s we basically promised Russia in both verbally and in writing. We promised Russia. There was never like an official agreement, but that doesn't change that this was a promise that one of our generals made to Russia was that we would not expand NATO past East Germany. And that was like kind of set in stone. That was kind of
when was that? Because I'm just trying to line the timeline because there's a lot of
90
treaties.
might have been there wasn't a treaty about this, but this was a promise that was made. It was in the early 90s, I believe. I want to say it was between 90 and 93. I'll have to send you
Sure.
my source on this at some point right after this debate. But
No.
so we promised Russia that, and then clearly with each new president, like since Clinton, we've just been adding more and more countries into NATO. That we brought NATO right up to Russia's border, and under Trump especially, we did that. And I think also it's quick side note, this idea that Trump is in bed with Russia is just insane. Like he was so hard against Russia, he sanctioned the crap out of them.
Yeah, toward the end he did.
Yeah, and he brought more countries that were like Latvia, like right on Russia's border, into NATO, which is like the number one thing Russia does not want, and Trump did it. So
yeah,
so
I never was into
Putin,
the Russian gate, theory with the Democrats.
Good, that's good to hear. But I think I lost my train of thought there.
No, you're saying Trump was pretty aggressive with Russia.
Right. So Putin has been warning of that basically he's been warning that he would invade Ukraine for a pretty long time now. And in 2014, see, I kind of wish I knew we were going to be talking about Ukraine a little further in advance because I would have brushed up on this history.
No, but the question I have, I agree with everything you just said, but Ukraine and Russia also had actual treaties. So, I mean, outside from that, that's irrelevant. If they had an agreement with Ukraine's sovereignty, why should they break that? And that's what you said. You're against Russia.
No, they shouldn't.
They shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So they can't just say, well, the United States did this. It's like, well, that's not in the treaty. Was that in the treaty? If the U.S. does this, it invalidates the treaty we have with you, Ukraine. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're making too many promises they can't keep. And that's on Putin, So, I mean.
Well, I think the United States kind of influenced this in 2014, there was a coup. And I think the United States kind of influenced it to install a new leader in Ukraine who was more friendly to the United States, less friendly to Russia. And, I think the influence that the United States has had on this conflict cannot be dismissed at all. I think it's very significant. I got to point you towards Scott Horton, who's the director of the Libertarian Institute, as well as editor-in-chief of antiwar.com. He has a lot of great things to say about this, and he's an expert on foreign policy, and I think he's the best voice.
Do you know Dylan Burns? He's like,
I know of Dylan Burns. He's debating Spike Cohen next week.
Yeah, he's debating a libertarian, and he goes to Ukraine, and I think that's really, he's a young dude too. I'm just like, I saw when he did like the hippy dippy stuff, and he would just organize people talking. I really admire the fact that, he gives people a platform and they discuss things. And it got a little crazy, but he's always calm and collective when he talks to people that disagree with him. And I love that. I want that to be a trend. And I just think that would be really cool to see a conversation with like Dylan Burns and someone that you would recommend, because I'm nowhere prepared.
Well, next week he's talking to somebody that I've met a few times. He's going to be debating Spike Cohen, who was the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee in 2020. And I've met Spike a few times in person. He's a really, really good dude, and he knows his shit. So it's going to be an interesting debate.
Yeah, they both are qualified to talk about their sides, and I'm looking forward to that now. So that would be a really good conversation to get value out of. Okay, so I think I don't feel like I gave my opinion about Ukraine. And
can I sum up what I think about Ukraine real quick?
Sure, go for it, man.
So we shouldn't have anything to do with it. We should butt the fuck out completely. We shouldn't be influencing that. It's a territorial dispute in Eastern Europe. Us being involved in that does not benefit us in any way whatsoever. It only weakens us. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. We should have nothing to do with that conflict. We are at risk of nuclear war right now, and we're only escalating this conflict and making nuclear war more likely. And I think we should just have nothing to do.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's an argument to be made to do it because it's a choke point. And I've heard the nuclear war talking point, and I'm like, I've heard this explained to me. I really don't have a strong opinion. I always prioritize domestic issues instead of foreign policy, but foreign policy is important, and I'm trying to do my best to educate myself. But Russia doesn't really have a lot of trying to air control, I guess, like, to reach the United States as far as the capabilities to do that, from what I've heard, because we have allies that also have nukes too, to counter any...
Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal on the face of the planet.
That's, yes, but they're not going to be able to fend off all the allies that are going to be... Even China has spoken against that, because one of the things about war, if you're going to go ahead and lay a nuke, you're going to ruin the infrastructure of the place that you want to get their resources from. So it's very counterproductive to destroy an established country. You want to go ahead and get a globalization, mentality, so you could be a part of it and benefit from it. And I think that's where Russia's getting screwed over. They're not a part of the club. And, I'm not educated enough to speak on that, but, it just doesn't make sense to have war. I mean, if you read, it's a fiction book, 1984, they were going like how the wars were going to be focused on more countries that are not developed, just to instill fear of war. And that's kind of what we see, like within Yemen and other impoverished nations.
I'm so glad you mentioned Yemen.
Yeah. And that instills fear with normies like us. We're like, oh, we don't want war. Look at all those pictures. But the likelihood of us bombing Russia, the likelihood of us bombing a place in China, we saw this in Japan. It was devastating. I don't think a lot of people are going to be, even the Chinese, they're like, yeah, don't do that, Russia, So they would lose, because a lot of countries would be like, dude, they are big consumers. We're making money off those Americans. So it would hurt their financial interests to do that.
Yeah, I think we would all lose. I think if a one nuke goes off, then all of the other ones go off too. I don't think there's any way to avoid that. I think, so many treaties and agreements, come into violation or question, after that happens. And I think once one nuke goes off, we got about 40 minutes left to live. I think that, we know for a fact that not only have people within our own State Department kind of teased that they're willing to use nukes, but so is Vladimir Putin. This nukes are on the table right now, and that is a fact. They're openly discussing it. I can't name any names off the top of my head for you, but again, I got to point you towards Scott Horton, who has a lot of great literature on this, as well as antiwar.com.
Russian oligarchs, they're wanting to come to other countries that are, probably not Russian, like with Putin. Isn't Putin dealing with a lot of issues with people in Russia right now? Because China's worst enemy is China itself, too. There's a lot of social outcry in China. And that isn't the same thing happening in Russia, because that's what sanctions do. It turns your country against you if you're a leader.
Well, there's a lot of conflict within Russia. What I do know, for what I've heard, I don't know if there's proof of this yet, but they've literally been conscripting anti-war activists within Russia to go fight Ukraine, which is so beyond fucked up, in my opinion. But what you also have in Russia right now is a ton of unity across the left and right spectrum. Everyone is on the same page that bringing NATO up to the Russia border is the red line you don't cross. And literally everyone is on the same page regarding that. Putin's most hardcore critics are on the same page as Putin with that. It's a very mutually agreed upon thing in Russia. And I just think the more we poke and prod, and the more billions of dollars in weapons we're sending to Ukraine, the more likely it is that Russia nukes Ukraine. And then maybe even Russia might want to nuke one of our cities. But if they nuke,
Russia
if they
wants
nuke
the
LA,
resources from Ukraine. So I don't know if that would be something. I don't know. I think Putin is just trying to push as much as he can to get more of what he can get. He doesn't want to come across as weak. He wants to be more of a presence at the negotiation table. Because,
well, I don't know if resources are the motivator, or at least the main motivator for the invasion. I think it's more so just Putin saying, hey, don't fuck with me. You're bringing NATO really close to me.
Oh, it's power.
I'm invading Ukraine now.
Yeah. I mean, like I said,
like a warning.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I was just thinking about they want to have control of that certain part of the region of Europe because of the resources. You know, it's a choke point. And Russia and China have good relationship. So I don't know. I mean, but it's an interesting topic, and I can't wait to see Dylan in that one libertarian that you pointed out debate it. But yeah, these are the kind of conversations I like to have, and I think
I'd
if more
also
people
really
go
would
ahead.
like to point you towards there's another libertarian by the name of Dave Smith. There's a really viral clip of him on the Joe Rogan Experience not too long ago, where he's sort of breaking down the history and what led up to this war in Ukraine. And I highly recommend giving that a watch. Sorry to interrupt. I
No,
keep
no,
doing
no,
that.
no, no,
It's
no,
ADHD.
no, dude. I mean, that's what when a lot of people have the willingness to just have these conversations and they want to add to the conversation. That's a great thing, man. I mean, we're over here trying to interrupt, but we're adding to a theme and trying to come up with solutions. And that's what I think we should
Right.
model is in a not just me, but everybody. If this could become a trend, that's what I try to push. And my capitalistic mentality is like, I want to do stuff on YouTube, but not politics. But yeah, man, I think this was a good conversation, and having a good panel would be something to look forward to in the future. And I don't think we really disagree on a whole lot. We just had probably some, strategic different approaches for like how we should allow the government to be a part of solving problems in our country, I guess. But other than that, hey man, it was nice having a conversation with you, dude.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on. This was a great conversation. It's one of the better conversations I've had, I think, on a podcast. And I'd love to come on a panel and talk a lot about my passionate opinions some more.
Hey man, well, have a good one and take it easy, dude. Later.